Hey, everybody. We are live. We are going to give a little bit of time for people to join us. It is Dayana from Design Files here, and today I am joined by Kim Horton. And Kim is the owner and principal designer of KH Home Design. With a passion for processes and efficiency and an entrepreneurial heart, Kim quickly grew her business to six figures. She now dedicates a portion of her time to developing those processes into easy to follow guides and documents to help other interior designers build their businesses. She presently owns one of the most expansive collections of forms available to the trade. We'll be diving into your questions during Q&A later, but for now, let's welcome Kim. Hi, Kim. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So we'll give a little bit more time before we dive into all the meaty questions. But to kick things off, I just wanted to mention how much I absolutely love your portfolio. Like dream style. I'm like, oh, it's earthy, but it's calm. Like it's fun, but it's light. Like it has some that modern element, but then really comfortable and warm too. So yeah, your portfolio is like stunning. So if anybody wants to hop over, is it Designs by KH? Is that it?
It is, yes, okay. DesignFiles.co. Yeah.
Yeah. If anybody wants to sneak over and take a peek at her portfolio, I recommend it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like, every home we walk into is outdated, and the easiest solution is to add like fresh elements. And so that's kind of like the one area like I'm niching myself in, is to just bring fresh elements to the design, whether it's an unexpected color or something that is just a breath of fresh air.
I felt that. I totally feel that from your
good.
Work,
it's working then.
It's totally working, because I was like, this is different. Like this feels really special. So super cool. Yeah. So today we are talking about client budgets, how to work with client budgets, how to help clients set, bigger budgets to achieve what they really want. So let's kick things off by chatting about, how do you determine when a client is a best fit for a project? How do you know when you can move forward?
Yeah, so I do a lot of screening at my initial design call. It is the most important step for me to be able to vet through clients. And so because I offer full service design and a la carte services, for me, it's not really, are they a good fit? It's what service best suits them. And so from there, I'm trying to determine two different things. The first one is going to be, what level of involvement do they want? That's automatically going to separate whether they're a full service client or an a la carte client for me. Just because they say they're full service doesn't mean they are full service. And so it's really important to continue vetting them and asking them questions. The second thing I'm looking for is, how excited am I to work with this client? What red flags am I identifying? And for me, these are all internal notes. Nobody else is ever going to see them. And so, I'm writing notes down, like, did they just talk my ear off for 45 minutes and I didn't get space to communicate? Have they told me they've worked with 10 different designers? Like, is that going to be an issue? So those are things that I like to look for. Like, I'm not ever trying to force a square peg into a round hole. And so for me, this is one area where it's really important to have my standards and make sure that these clients are fitting those standards and those services to mitigate frustration that can happen from forcing the square peg into the round hole.
Yeah. I love that concept of listening to your excitement, because I think like our emotions and our intuition can actually, give us a lot more answers than we give credit for. So I love that you kind of put in some of those hard things, as well as, some of the softer side of it too. So do you like to use the word budget or investment when talking with clients?
Yeah, I am a stickler for this one. I feel like the vocabulary that you use and the way that you show up is so important. So just like I wouldn't walk into a room and say, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
I'm also not going to say budget. And for me, the word budget has a connotation to it, right? It insinuates cheap, inexpensive. And even if we think in terms of like IKEA, for example, well, if you're designing out an entire space around IKEA, it still adds up to a pretty penny, right? Now, it may
Yeah.
not be as much as like restoration hardware, for example.
Hmm.
But when I'm using the word investment, the definition of that is the financial spend with an expectation that they are going to get a material end result. That's what
Right.
I'm delivering. That's what I want.
Yeah.
I'm not cheap. Furniture is not cheap. My design is not going to look cheap. And so you're going to pay for what you get. In using the word investment, I feel like it's neither, it doesn't indicate that I'm expensive. It doesn't indicate explicitly or implicitly that I'm cheap. And that's really what I want, because at the end of the day, I want to be able to design a space without care or concern for what the cost of that is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, they are getting like an investment. We also think of like the return on investment, right? Where it's like
Right.
you are going to get, amazing furniture, great design, like, could be, yeah, renovations that's going to improve the value of the home, whether it becomes, an Airbnb or you enjoy it for years. Like, so that makes a lot of sense to be careful with that language.
Yeah.
I know that you recommend that designers not discuss the exact investment or estimated investment during a call,
Mhm.
or during the discovery call. So why
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah, that's a hard no for me. Hard no. I feel like sometimes you have to learn things the hard way, right? And so earlier in my business career, I was doing that. I wanted the right clients. And so I was communicating off the bat. Here's what this is going to cost you. Unfortunately, what that cost me was clients, right? So
Mhm.
I feel like the easiest thing is they're going to hang up on you. As soon as you say a number that's entirely unrealistic, they're going to hang up on you. And I can't tell you how many clients I've had come to me and they're filling out their questionnaire before our phone call and they write their budget is $10,000. Now, I know it's not $10,000 and you guys know it's not ever going to make $10,000. But the clients don't understand how these things sort of add up and they're not understanding how realistic their budget actually is into things. So from
Mhm.
here, you have two different options. The first one is tell them it's going to cost them 60K and let them hang up on you. If that's not a client you want in the first place, by all means, say it. They'll at least be more educated for the next person that they do end up calling. The second thing is leave it alone. And that's what I do. So I will note it. Their budget is $10,000. This client is going to require education. And for me, that's perfectly fine because every client requires education, anyways, whether it's on my process, how my payment schedule is done, what they can expect. I have to
Mhm.
educate them, anyways. And I might as
Right.
well take the time to educate them on what it costs for me to design a space for them, which is not true across the board either. Other designers may have different fees. They may price a different way. They may have elevated, luxurious looks. Those
Mhm.
are all things to take into consideration too.
Interesting. Okay, so I know you don't recommend stating the exact investment during the
Mhm.
discovery call, but you do, ask some questions to get a ballpark understanding of what the client might be able to spend. So, what are some of the questions that you ask to start to understand for yourself, where their range is?
Yeah, so I have 5 separate questions on my questionnaire that I ask clients. So, first, my process is the initial design call. When we've gotten through that and they've booked their consultation, I then send them a very long, lengthy questionnaire for them to fill out.
Mhm.
There's 5 separate questions on there. The first one is, have you ever worked with a designer or a contractor before? Automatically, that tells me how educated are you and how contractors and designers work. Doesn't mean
Right.
you know me specifically, so I still need to educate you, but it gives me a good ballpark of how understanding they are of the prices.
Mhm.
The second thing is I pick a key piece of furniture that everybody understands, which is sofas for me. And I will say, what price point are you comfortable at? Now, for me, it's not an open ended question. I'm giving you 3 different options. And mine are 5,000, 10,000, and 15,000. So
Mhm.
that tells me immediately, are you in that good, better, or best category, right? And
Okay.
everybody understands the cost of a sofa, but they don't understand the cost of an entire room.
Right.
The third question I ask is, if something is over budget, do you want me to show it to you?
Mhm.
Again, those have options too. The first one is going to be, how much over budget is it? The second one is absolutely show me. And the third one is, we'll have to talk about it.
Okay.
And that gives me a really good consensus of how open are they to what this budget is going to look like. This question also implicitly applies that I'm probably going to go over budget. So how are you going to feel about it? How are you going to handle it?
Right.
Which is a great thing
Yeah.
to know.
That's great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The fourth question is, where do you typically shop for furniture?
Okay.
And then the fifth question is a follow-up to that is, where do you shop for accessories? So, if you're shopping at IKEA, you're probably on a budget, or you have young children and you value minimal investment on things that your kids are going to mess up. If you're shopping at Restoration Hardware, you may not necessarily understand the cost to value ratio, and I have to educate you. So those are all really good ways of kind of pinpointing and identifying, like, where is this client going to fall and how much education are you going to have to do based on their responses?
Yeah, really, really smart questions, because you kind of get into where they're currently at and then also where they might be open to going. Like, how much flexibility do they have? How open are they to, just spending more to get what they really want? So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm guessing you worked on those over years. I'm guessing that was years of effort to craft those, huh?
Yeah, and they get tweaked, and I have some very random questions that don't sound like they make sense, but they do to me, and that's all that I'm looking for. But I'm also, in my questions, I'm setting the expectations, right? So I didn't tell you like I'm coming in on budget. I already, set it up to be that I'm going to go over it. And I think that setting the expectations is really an important part of those questions too.
Yeah. So I know that you have an exercise for us, some little reflective questions to kind of get us thinking about, our own feelings on working with client budgets. So I'm going to let you take it away and guide us through answering these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, one thing that I learned is how comfortable you are speaking about budgets personally translates into your professional life. So, the first question is, how comfortable are you with discussing your personal finances? Do you do that in your marriage? Do you talk about finances with your friends? Are you a little bit skeptical? Like, where would you rate yourself on that scale? Um, the second question is going to be, what holds you back from having those conversations with clients? For me personally, I found that fear is the number one answer here. It's people fearing that they're going to lose clients. Like, this is an industry of people pleasers. That's just what it is. We are just all people pleasers. But if you're operating from a fear-based place, you're hurting yourself and your clients in the long run. So taking a moment to kind of process, like, what is that fear? What is it for you? What is holding you back from doing this and having these conversations and being blunt about it? The third question is, what feedback do you get from your clients when you are discussing an investment? Are they hanging up on you? Are they wishy-washy? And then bring that to the first two questions you've asked yourself. Are you asking, or are you stating these things in a way that sounds wishy-washy? If you yourself are not certain, they are not going to be certain. You have to stand your ground and own your business and your practices so that somebody else can do the same too. And they can understand that, wow, she's confident. She knows what she's talking about. And then the fourth question is, what is your ideal response? What would you like to hear from clients? Like, what would make you happy and say, yes, this is the perfect client for me?
Love all of those. Super insightful. For that fourth one, like, what does your ideal response look like? When somebody knows that, how can they increase their chances of getting that ideal response? Like, do you feel like it's just by knowing it, you can kind of like be more comfortable and kind of attract that response? How can they kind of help actually get that?
I think it really sort of comes down to confidence. Like, I am a very blunt and direct person. There is no miscommunication, there's no wavering in my responses. It's, this is the price, or this is the ballpark of it. This is what you're looking at. And there's not really any negotiating around that. And so when you stand confidently, when somebody who comes to me and says, I do have a $10,000 budget, and we're at the place of actually discussing budgets, then I can have an honest conversation about what it really is to be realistic about what they're going to spend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point, when you start to have these conversations, then you build up this confidence in yourself it's like second nature to you. Like it just comes naturally.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to get into this interesting, concept that you have. I have a
Yeah.
bunch of questions about this,
Yeah, I
where
bet.
where you ask clients, to allow you to design their dream vision without a
Mhm.
set budget, and you ask them to let you then work backwards from there. So first off, how did you come up with that strategy?
Yeah, so when I was in the earlier years of my business, I invested in mentors. For me, that was the easiest way to up-level myself and my business very quickly. It was learning from other people's mistakes and implementing that myself. And one of my mentors, Veronica Solomon, had mentioned that she does this. And I am a very logical, rational person. It didn't make sense to me. It did not make any sense. I'm like, why would you do that? And it took me quite a bit of time to understand that there doesn't need to be a monetary value to what I am providing. Like money is money, right? Whether I'm implementing a design for the average Joe or I am doing a luxurious design, everybody's budget is different. Everybody's wallet looks different.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of how I got that idea. And it took me a little bit of time to figure out how that was going to work for me and my clients and to implement it. But it's been a great strategy and it's worked really well for me.
Cool. So how do you know who to pitch it to, right? Because this concept of, you know, I want to ask you to let me design your dream vision, how to set
Mhm.
budget, work backwards from there. Do you pitch that to everybody, or based on those 5 questions, then okay, this person is a fit to make this request?
Mhm. I pitch it to everybody straight
Okay.
across the board. My full service clients and my a la carte clients get a version of this conversation.
Mhm.
So my a la carte clients are basically curated shopping lists. And so I will tell them the benefit add of doing that is that they can purchase these products whenever they want down the line when additional funding becomes available.
Right.
I don't wanna design a space with a limitation. I feel
Mhm.
like my creativity is capped. I'm capped, the design is capped. It's not going to be my best work.
Mhm.
And so this is my approach with everybody straight across the board. Now, those 5 questions I ask will help me decide how far do I push that envelope, right? So if I know that your sofa is at 5,000 and I'm gonna present to you a six-figure room, I already know that you're probably gonna have a fit. And I know that I'm gonna need to approach that a little bit differently, but I don't want the creativity to be capped. And so that's where the flexibility comes in with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like for each based on, the investment that they're comfortable with, then it's like you push it, however
Yeah.
much. And I like that concept that they can, of course, add to it, down the line. And I'm guessing that's something that you might talk with them about, right? Where it's like, this might be phase one and this might be phase 2 and 3. Like you could add this painting later or whatever it is. Kind of give them
Absolutely.
that plan. Yeah. Okay, so we kind of hit on this a little bit, but I'm curious if you have anything more to say on what working backwards from there really looks like. So it could look like phasing out the purchases. What else could that mean in terms of working backwards?
Yeah, so the practical application of working backwards for me is one, I start with the design. No parameters, no budgets, no barriers. I'm starting with the design and I'm going to present the best design that I have. Every full service client of mine gets a revision within their design. And so the working backwards part of that happens within the design presentation and the revision phase. And so I will ask them, what is your feedback? I'm not specifically going to ask, how do you feel about the budget? Or do you want me to cut this? Is this too much money for you? I just give a very general, how do you feel about this design? What are your initial impressions? And I let them come back to me. I've learned that when I sit here and I pinpoint the budget specifically, somebody is always going to want cheaper, right? If it's a $50,000 room design and they can get away with spending $40,000 for it, why wouldn't they? And so the working backwards part is asking that very general question. How do you feel about this design? And then taking all of their feedback into consideration and revising it. Now, some clients will come back and say, a couple of these pieces are a little bit more than we were wanting to spend, or the design overall is a little bit more. And so then I will make some cuts. Typically, I have backups available anyways, and I will put those into place. And that way I can work the budget down without sacrificing the design, because I have already had that final vision of the design, and it then becomes easier to make revisions.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like you were able to create the design that you wanted. And then if you have to swap things out, then you can do that versus starting with a really tight budget at the beginning. And you're like, oh, every decision, you're calculating, you're thinking too hard about it.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. Does this strategy end up causing more revision requests? Like since you implemented it, did you notice you had more revision requests, or was it around the same?
No, not at all. I have actually found that I have had less. So everybody is satisfied with the one revision, and those changes are pretty minimal at that point. I've presented the best design I can. I've justified it. I've talked about it extensively at the presentation and why I chose those things. And when I have an opportunity to speak, the clients are on board. They're understanding where I'm coming from, why I made the choices that I made. And so then it really comes down to minimal feedback. Like I had a client say to me, well, we really don't like velvet texture. Okay, great. Swapped a couple of them out. There was another client who said she wanted the price a little bit lower. So I was able to work it down a couple $1,000s. But, if we're being honest, in the extent of like furniture, right, there's 6 couches that look the same. There's 5 different coffee tables that look the same, and they're all at different price points. And so then the revisions become a lot easier to swap things out for things that look or feel the same, but have a different sort of price point associated with it. So I honestly have not run into that problem. On the flip side, when I have gone in with the budget, my revisions are limited. There's only so many things that I can do. If you're already in that bottom tier category, my capacity is limited. Not only was my design limited, my capacity to revise this is limited. And now I'm hurting myself because my margin is not going to be what I thought it was, because I've already dwindled myself into a very small niche category that is going to feel painful for me later.
Yeah, makes sense. So I know that you kind of implemented this strategy, it wasn't like right at the beginning of your business.
Right.
Do you feel like this is a fit for all designers, or do you think maybe that good, better, best method is a little bit, better for some designers, or is it better to actually really discuss the investment in detail and get a really hard estimate when you're newer in your business? So talk me through a little bit about, what to do at different stages of a design business and your comfort level, right?
Right, absolutely. And that definitely plays into it. So, depending on where you are in your business and how comfortable you are having these conversations, will depend on how you approach this subject. So, in my opinion, if you are somebody who, like me in the beginning of my business, was very logical, analytical, and needed solid answers, or you don't quite know yourself what an entire room design costs, I recommend using the Good, Better, Best guide to price this out. Now, there's 2 different versions of that. The one is, if you are not familiar with what a full room costs, experiment yourself. Go through the Good, Better, Best guide. Pick every single item that you're going to add, associate a fee with it, tally it up, and get familiar with what it is going to cost you. That can be just in a theoretical thing. That can be walking around your house and tallying this up. Once you're familiar and you're understanding these things, you can then develop a different method. When you are with clients, however, and you're in the beginning and you really want that solid answer, you can do the good, better, best guide with them. The caveat to that is, when a client hears a specific number, of which this will spit out a specific number, they're going to hold you to that. And so that's kind of where you pigeonhole yourself into a scenario, right? Like if you end up coming above that, they're not going to be happy with you. If you're under that, great, everybody's happy and fine. But it does kind of put you in a precarious situation that you do want to be careful of. So in that situation, what I always say to clients is, this is just an estimate. I would anticipate adding another 20 to 30% just to allow for the design to take precedence. when you're familiar with your numbers, you know what rooms cost. You can walk into a living room and you can say, based on my experience, the space this size is going to cost you X, Y, and Z. Then you can go with the method that I currently use, which is really just to not discuss budget at all and tell them straight up that you're going to design first and you'll figure out the budget as you go along.
Yeah.
And I think that that's easy enough to say, because I don't know if this room is going to 100% cost you until I've actually done the design. And I need to work my way through that to give you that very, very solid answer you're looking for.
Right. And just for people that missed the conversation earlier where Kim was talking about the cost of a sofa. So good would be 5,000, better would be 10,000, best would be 15,000. So that's the good, better, best method. And you kind of add those up together and walk clients through it. And that's also in your client budgets guide, right? Which is in your shop, and it's an affordable fee. Yeah. And we've got a post somewhere in the event section. There's a pinned post with a link to her guides, and we'll chat about that a little bit later. But I just wanted to mention that for people who had missed that we had talked about that earlier. So I've lost my train of thought here with how does this come into with renovations, right? Because if there's control or costs out of your control, then you're really going to not want to give a specific estimate, right? Like if it's a renovation project versus only redecorating, then I'm assuming you would suggest not to give like one of those hard estimates, even if you're newer in your business. Would you agree?
Absolutely. If there is any level of construction or renovation involved, I don't communicate anything about budget. One, it's not my place. I'm not a contractor. Two, I feel like that puts you in a position where you should be able to stand behind that. And obviously, with the cost of lumber rising and all of these other things, it's hard to give a definitive number and then stick to that number. Also, I haven't done your design yet. I don't know what I want to do. Do I want a fireplace that's Carrara marble all the way up, or are we doing shiplap? Like those are very big price differences. And so until I've really pinned down that uncapped design, I can't really say one way or another what it's going to cost you. A living room could be $25,000. It could be $200,000. That is a very broad range. And so the design has to come first for me by default to be able to pinpoint those things.
Absolutely. Let's see. So what are some common types of pushback that you have gotten? Because I imagine, that you are going to get some pushback to this method, right? That some people are going to be like, well, wait a second. I really need you to give me like a number, right? Or whatever kind of pushback that you might get. So what are you getting? What kind of responses are you getting when people are like, what?
Yeah. So the first pushback I get is on the initial design call. Clients will say, I'm really looking for a number, or I need to be able to plan this. And so my response is then, I can't give you a number until I've seen the space. I don't know the square footage of your living room. I don't know if you have a fireplace that needs to be updated. You have baseboard heating that I need to take into consideration here. Like, what other factors are going to be a deterrent for me to be able to answer those questions? And so by default, everybody gets the answer of, I really can't give you that information until I've seen this space. I feel like that's the easiest way to sum it up. It's the easiest way to bypass that situation. And it's a very passive way of bypassing it, right? I'm not telling you I'm not going to give it to you. I'm telling you I need more information to get me to the place where I can answer that for you. The second pushback is, that's outside of my budget. And so when I'm at a consultation, that's the appropriate time to discuss investment, how much a room is going to cost, my process, my design fees. All of those things for me are discussed at the consultation. And that's the opportunity to do that. And so from there, the options are, one, to accept the client's budget, right? $10,000. Sure, I'll work with it. The second option is going to be to reevaluate that, talk to them, have a conversation about it. So in the first choice where you're saying, I'm just going to accept it, the client has really told you upfront, I can't do this. this is my hard stop. And so at that point, you're forcing the square peg into the round hole.
Right.
Now you've lost your standards, right? You want those elevated projects, and you've just put yourself in a scenario where you're not going to meet your own goal. And so that's kind of the caveat to it. The second one is have these conversations with clients. Tell them how, in your experience, what a room is actually going to cost. That way they can make appropriate decisions. Now, for me, it's never, how can I get you a lower price? It's, let's talk about how we can do less to meet your budget. So if you are wanting a living room design, I'm not going to tell you I'm going to fill it with IKEA to meet your $10,000 budget. We're going to have a conversation about what items in this living room are we going to choose to keep so that I can keep that budget down for you. And I'm now procuring a lot less for you. Or maybe that fireplace doesn't need to be updated. So I'm not sacrificing my quality. I'm not sacrificing my level of work. I'm saying to you, we're going to get you less because that's all that can fit within that $10,000 price point that you're hoping to stay between.
Right. And that keeps everything on brand for you too. And the experience that you want to provide, which obviously comes back to them wanting to work with you again or refer, so that way you're building your brand and your business with the right approach and not kind of downgrading it.
Absolutely. It's a liability. And that's how I see it. Now, I've had those clients. I had a client come to me and say, I have $10,000 and I have 3 rooms I want to get done. And I just about choked on site. That is not possible. I can barely do half a room for $10,000. And so when I heard them say that, it was automatically clear to me, these are not full service clients. I don't care how busy they are, how much they want me to do the work for them. Their budget in no capacity aligns with a good quality work that I want to put out and put my name on. And so they automatically by default were an a la carte client. And so I had to make some inferences in what they were saying to figure out truly where they belonged, because it wasn't what they said,
Right. And so for your a la carte service, you're delivering a shoppable list. Is that right?
Yeah, so I have different levels of service. I think there's about 6. Really, I only use 4 consistently. So my a la carte services are paint color consultations. I also do walk and talk consultations, which are widely the most popular package. Essentially, it's exactly what it says. It's 1 hour. It's just a walk and talk. It's basically a crash decorating course for them to follow through and do with on their own. It's all verbal. There is nothing on my end.
Cool.
And then I offer the curated shopping list, and I have 2 different versions of that depending on what their needs are.
Okay. Very cool. So guys, I'm going to hop into Q&A. Yay. This is where it gets crazy. No, I'm just kidding. This is where it gets crazy for me because I got to try to find my questions and stay on the right track. Okay. So here we go. Diving into Q&A. Do you have a service where you help clients come up with their budgets? Clients don't know what a realistic budget should be, especially with remodel. So we hit on this kind of, but how do you approach that? That education piece, I guess, where you are kind of helping them figure that number out. How and when do you do that?
Yeah. So the first part for me in that is to involve the contractor. I let him quote out all of his services first. And then the client and I will sit down and have a conversation and go over that. We'll talk about how realistic that number is. Is there somebody who can come in and possibly do it for a little bit less? For me, that's really important because not every contractor works the same. And so, as I'm sure you guys are all familiar, there are a ton of contractors who come in and underbid, right? And so I want to see those numbers and I want to see how realistic they are. At the end of the day, for me, that's not my area, that's the contractors. And so it's his responsibility to be pricing those out and providing those. It is my responsibility, however, to be the client's advocate and to go through those and say, okay, you know what? I, in my head, was planning on that Carrera marble fireplace. So this stone number needs to go up dramatically and kind of have those conversations to set realistic expectations of what they're going to be looking at.
Okay. So let's see. Do you have contractors' construction pricing that keeps the budget accurate? I guess that's kind of in the same, pretty much the same wheelhouse, right?
Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay, I see a lot of pushback happening if a client feels that you spent time sourcing product that is over what they feel comfortable spending, especially if you charge per hour. Thoughts on
Mhm.
that?
Yes. When you are sourcing, be efficient. For
Mm,
me, when I know where if I'm looking at a coffee table, for example, I know what I'm looking for. Say I want it to be brass, I want round, and I have a certain dimension to work with. When I'm
yeah.
sourcing for that, if I see 3 or 4 that meet that category, I save them immediately. Those are my backups. I pick my number one, which
Mhm.
may not be based on price. It's based on stylistically what fits this project best. And I have my number 2, 3, and 4 in my back pocket. So if the client has an issue with that price, within a matter of 1 second, I have my backup in hand. I'm not resourcing this project from the beginning. And so I feel like working really efficiently saves time in doing that.
Yeah, and then they're not feeling like, "Oh, she's gonna take a week to get back to me with the new options," which means she's running up the bill, like, have it all ready to
Right.
go. It obviously
Right.
shows them like, "Okay, like, I didn't just spend a ton more for this," right? So that's smart.
Right. And when you're
Yeah,
sourcing in the first place, you have parameters around it. There's always a size that works. There's the style that you're looking for. And so that automatically mitigates going from like say 6 hours of sourcing down to 1 and you're just adding a couple of extra links somewhere.
okay. So do you ever tell your clients how much a space will be overall instead of showing the price for each piece so they don't overanalyze the cost for a side table, even though the total cost of room is still within budget?
Yeah, I've heard some designers do that. That's not my preference.
Right.
I have had almost every single one of my clients who I've done something similar with come back to me and say, "Can I please have an itemized invoice?" And
Mm,
so for me, my design presentation is the itemized invoice, and that's very clear to my clients. So I don't want to spend extra time putting this into a spreadsheet or an invoice and then sending it to them. I'm also not going to give them access to my internal documents. So for
uh,
me, I'd rather put the price on there upfront and mitigate that issue going forward.
right. Okay. So do you find, oh, this is an interesting question. So this method of, designing without a budget, essentially, without a
Mhm.
set budget. Do you find this method gives you more or less projects to photograph?
Oh, more, definitely
More.
more. I have complete creative freedom. I'm not capped at anything. I can do whatever I want, and the sky is the limit. For me, those are portfolio clients. As I was entering this field, my priority was my portfolio, right? That's the work that speaks for myself. That's how I sell myself. And we are in a very visual industry. And
Yeah.
I actually would not take clients on who were not going to be a portfolio client for that reason. And so it was really important for me to be able to have the clients who either gave me the freedom financially or gave me the freedom creatively so I can have the portfolio I wanted at the end of the day.
Yeah.
When I have a client who's on a budget, that $10,000 guy with his 3 rooms never ever would have made it to a portfolio, no matter how cheap I was, no matter how much I tried to save or even reuse their pieces. Like we know clients don't have the best furniture, hence why they're hiring us in the first place. So
Totally.
this method has worked for me for that reason, and I've single-handedly built out my portfolio because of that.
Yeah. I love this because it comes back to what you're saying about the people pleasing thing, right? Where it's
Yeah.
so clear you are focused, you know the type of business you want, you know the type of
Mhm.
portfolio you want, and you're going to go for it and you're going to get it? So like
Yeah.
snaps, snaps to that. Everybody like
Thank you.
let that energy wash over you.
Yes, and
That's
let it wash over
great.
all of you guys
Yeah.
too. I
Yeah.
think when you have so much clarity on your business and your model, you can set the proper expectations. I don't have a lot of clients who side rail or freak out in the middle of a project because I've been so clear and direct from the very beginning about what they can expect all throughout the entire process. And that's really set me up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a bit about like the contractor, like pricing and conversations. So
Yeah.
this is like a related question. The good, better, best method may work for products, but what about talking about overall, interior architectural work? So if you're trying
Mhm.
to gauge somebody's kind of approach on that, and they maybe don't know, okay, what will new, kitchen tile cost me, or maybe not tile, but
Right.
how will they how do you talk about that if you're in that
Yeah.
state?
A lot of that really comes down to like experience and knowing your numbers. I know for me that I can't do a kitchen design under $100,000. I can't. At that point, I've sacrificed on something. It's probably their quality of cabinets, which I really don't want to put my name behind. So it's
Mhm.
kind of working with contractors and building up this information and this knowledge in your head. If that's something that you don't have experience with, then do what I discussed before. Have the contractor come in and price these things out. Sit there and take a moment to like look and see what is the contractor charging and start to understand yourself how this all this information translates into a room design.
Mhm.
Again, it's based on the design too, so it's really important that you have a general sense at least of what you wanna do for the space so that you're speaking education and knowledge and not just, "Well, it could be this or it could be that." Because now you sound a bit flaky and the client's gonna be like, "Well, which one is it?" And now they want a definitive answer.
Okay. So we're getting some questions on like how you're organizing your pricing, like your design fees. How are you
Mhm.
organizing that? Are you doing flat rates? Are you doing all hourly? What does that look like?
So I am hourly and I charge my full amount of estimated hours up front and present it as a flat fee. So I will sit there and I will calculate all of my hours for the entire project from the initial start to completion, all the way, including installation. When I
Mhm.
calculate my hours, I put that in as a minimum hourly spend.
Okay.
So the number of hours is on there, and I will let clients know if we go over, you owe me more. I've had some projects that have ran a year or two past where they should be, and I want to make sure that I'm getting paid for all of my time collectively.
Right.
Also, in a flat fee for me, I did try that model, and it's a little bit inconsistent, right? There may be some projects where you exceed what you thought, and there may be some where you made a good margin on it. And if
Mm,
you're new to the industry, I always recommend starting with the hourly so you can be sure that you're getting paid for the amount of time that you're putting in. When
right.
you've learned what a room takes to actually, put it together, or even per square foot, right? When you have that information, then it's a lot easier to say, okay, we're going to switch to a flat fee model now, and I'm going to mark that up substantially past what I know it would take to actually do this design.
Okay. And so are you itemizing those hours or showing those hours? Like, so that if you have to say, okay, we are going to go over and give them a heads up and here's why, how do you manage those kind of conversations?
Yeah, so I track all of my hours in Timely. Everything is put in there, even communication. Anytime I get an email or a text message, it's being tracked and being accounted for. And
Right.
so will let the clients know when we're down to about 20 hours left in their package. I'll send them an email and I say, we're getting low on hours. I expect this will continue until installation to take X number of hours. Here's
Mhm.
the hourly report of how I've spent all of your hours so far. And it's a massive report at that point, right? It's like 4 or 5 pages. And then I let them know this is what I expect going forward. Now, that's subject to change if the scope of work changes, if you require more communication, and those sorts of things. So
Mhm.
I always make sure that I keep in touch, that they know where they're at with their hours, what to expect moving forward, and again, setting expectations.
Okay. Let's see. How do you, let's see, no, that's kind of, we covered that one. How do you, I lost it. See, this is where I get, I get lost in here sometimes. Oh, do you ever implement or imply a minimum for projects or furniture, like with any of your marketing content? Because obviously, you are doing higher end projects. Like, are you
Mhm.
sharing any minimums, or do you feel like by the look of your portfolio, clients should kind of understand, that it's not going to be, 10K? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so just so if I can clarify this question, it's asking if I use a minimum for like the furniture, right? If I tell them it'll be a
Yeah.
minimum of X
Or if
number of
you use
dollars.
a minimum for projects or furniture on any of your marketing content. So like on your website or your
Mhm.
emails, do you put like,
Gotcha.
hey, you got to be here or above?
Gotcha. I do not. I do
Mhm.
not. For me, that goes back to the initial design call, right? Where the client's going to tell me their budget is $10,000 and it's my job to educate them. I've seen designers put kitchens starting at $200,000. I personally, even as a designer, if I saw that, that would be a little off putting to me because somebody's already setting a limitation into the way in which they're going to work with you.
Right.
I would rather have the clients who are going to allow me the space to communicate how I work, how I budget, how I price, how I design. And so for me, it's really important that that education piece be there. And mind you, it's not just educating them on pricing, it's educating them on me and my process. And I have to do
Mhm.
that anyways.
Right.
And there's a lot more flexibility, right? I'm shaping and molding this client into understanding me and this pricing structure. And that may be different for somebody who specializes in, say, middle of the line sort of designs, or somebody who does like that really, really elevated sort of look. It's
Mhm.
different across the board.
Yeah. With this good, better, best method, we're getting some questions about how clients might feel, oh, this one's only good, but this one's, the best. Like when you're
Mhm.
doing that, when you say, okay, what are you willing to spend on a sofa? Would it be 5, 10, 15? Are you externally sharing this good, better, best like words? Or is that like an internal thing and you're just asking them the prices and you're not actually saying good, better, best to them?
Yeah, so let's go over that. So I have a good, better, best guide for designers that can be downloaded and purchased so that a designer has it on their end and you can manipulate and change any of the numbers. I also use that client facing. So in the earlier years of my business, I would actually sit down with this client right at the consultation. I would say, great, we're going to go over the budget so we can kind of understand and get on the same page about where we're going to be with your investment, right?
Mhm.
And I would say now these categories are based on good, better, best. So the higher price point is going to give you the best option available. In
Right.
most cases, that's custom or semi custom, even sometimes.
Mhm.
And I will ask them, okay, we need to look at upholstery. Here's the sofa. Are you comfortable with 5K, 10K, 15K? Or whatever the numbers might be, right? And I'm writing their answer down. So they
Mhm.
can fluctuate between the two. And I highly recommend it. Like everybody is going to want a decent level of upholstery. But you
Yeah.
may not want the best quality lamp if you have a 4-year-old running around who's going to make a mess and knock it over. And so for me, it's important to identify to these clients that there is a good, better, best category and that it's perfectly acceptable to fluctuate between all of them. And so that ends up giving you a custom number at the end of it. And
Yeah.
so all of this is pre-formatted on the good, better, best guide. At the bottom, there's even a spot for you to calculate freight, your state tax, and then to add on, I think somewhere between 15 to 20% for the receiving fee and getting all of that in. And so that gives you a much better consensus of what a client is going to actually be looking at the end of this.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and it's like the way that you're framing it, right? It's not like it's like this one's bad and then good. Like it's starting
Yeah.
with good. The language isn't too harsh, and then the fact that people can switch between them based on their priorities, their lifestyle. So yeah, I can see how the way that you position it makes it seem really helpful for them too, because then they can say like, I want to save a little here, but I definitely want,
Mhm.
the best here. So I love that. Let's see. Hmm. Let me get to, okay. As a general, very broad example, how many hours do you estimate it would take you for a redecor of a family room with a 15K budget? Putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, definitely. Also, not a lot of information there.
Okay.
How big
Yeah.
is this space? Because that's going to
Right.
matter. My family room is kind of the great room of my house. It's a vaulted ceiling. It's a larger space. I absolutely cannot do that in $15,000. $15,000 living room, even if it is a small living room space, is still really, really tight to accomplish that. And at that point, you're not using wholesale. So you have to use retail. And in order to hit 15K, you're looking at like Wayfair pieces. Maybe you can bump your upholstery up to like West Elm or Pottery Barn, but you are really looking at that low end for $15,000. In my experience, I have never been able to do a living room, no, even a smaller size, for under $30,000. So I
Mhm.
would start increasing that price right away. In my earlier years, what I did was I did my own space, right? And I bought cheap because I have very young kids and I have twins and they just terrorized everything. And
Mhm.
I did my living room about $20,000 nice and cheap. When I started communicating things to clients, I automatically doubled my numbers. Whatever I thought it was going to be, I just doubled it. If I know I can do your space for $20,000 retail, well, now it's a $40,000 wholesale. What's
Right.
important for me is to be able to have that margin on it. And so when you've put yourself into a position where you're doing a living room at that $10,000 or $15,000, you're only going to be making about $2,000 on that room. Versus if
Mhm.
you have the conversation and you're clear about your expectations that this room is easily going to cost you 40K plus, now there's profit for you. You're incentivized to be able to design that space and you're far more realistic, which is going to make the client happy at the end because they knew what to expect.
Yeah. So where do you try to keep your margin? Like, what's your minimum goal margin for a
My
project?
bare minimum is 30% across the board. My ideal is somewhere between 40 to 45%.
Mhm. Mhm.
And obviously that depends on my accounts that I have with vendors and that sort of thing. But 30 is the bare minimum, to the
Okay.
point where if I am ordering retail, like even accessories, there's a 30% markup across the board. I don't care if West Elm is only going to give me 10 or 20%. I'm marking up 30% from MSRP so I can kind of stay within those projected margins of what I'm looking for. I
Okay.
also am not a personal shopper, so I'm putting in a lot of work to be able to do that, thus the increase in price.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you are pricing your à la carte services,
Mhm.
like the walk and talk, and the shopping lists, are you still doing hourly or do you have like a flat rate packages for those, kind of DIY type clients?
Yeah, so my a la cartes are pretty much flat fee. There is one a la carte service called Hourly Design, which is based on hours. That is
Mhm.
specifically for clients who have miscellaneous things throughout their house, which is also a popular package of mine. My
Mhm.
consultations are a bare minimum of $495. I do not leave my house for less than $495. One exception is if it is just a paint color consultation, it's $395. My
Mhm.
walk and talk is more than my standard consultation because I am literally talking my butt off that entire hour. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot for me, but I am specific. This is the rug size you should get. This is the design I want you to do. This is where you should put all of it. And
Mm.
if I'm giving you a crash decorating course in everything that I have learned in my years of business, and I'm trying to accumulate it into an easy to understand package for you,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of an upcharge for that, right? It's
Yeah.
not just my time now, it's my time, my knowledge, and my
The
expertise. And I'm
experience.
having to be fast with that information so you can get a lot of it.
Yeah. We did get a question what that exact fee is, if you don't mind sharing for the walk
Yeah,
and talk.
my walk and talk is $695, and that's
Yeah.
within a 30-mile radius of my
Mhm.
location. Anything
Mhm.
outside of that goes up another $100.
Yeah, yeah, makes a lot of sense, and it's also probably wipes you out a little bit too, because you're right, you're
It
sharing, you're on
does.
the ball, yeah, so you
It
gotta
does. When I
create it
have
for that.
clients who have like 7 plus rooms, I will actually book them for 2 hours, and it's a
Okay.
ton of information, and I'm very clear about that when they book the appointment. I will tell them, "This is a fast-paced appointment. You need to have a pen and paper handy. I will talk a lot. I will say a lot of very important measurements. You need to write it down because there is no follow-up." And for me, it's like once I say it, it's out of my brain. If you call me a week later, I have no idea what I said to you because I just flew through it and I just tried to pack it So the value add was there, and they have enough information to run with.
Yeah, it's a cool service. And I bet, have you gotten people wanting to go full service after some of those? Have you had that yet?
No, most of the time I
No?
give a ton of information and they're
Yeah,
overwhelmed, but those clients are not ever meant to be full service clients. Like,
right,
if you're okay hearing me talk for an hour and writing down all of those notes, you are easily a DIY client.
right.
So there's cases where quite a bit of them will come back and say, okay, I need a little bit more specific help. I've sourced these 6 area rugs. I just need you to confirm that stylistically they were what you wanted.
Hmm.
And so I'm happy to do that. I'll book a virtual consultation with them or another one-off consultation to do that. But
Okay.
if they're asking for that in the first place, they'll never be full service. No matter how overwhelming your information is, they will never tip the scale that way.
Right. And so that's why you have these other options. You have that like miscellaneous hours one. You have ways to earn revenue from the clients that are not a fit for full service. So I think that's a really good
Yeah.
takeaway,
Yeah.
right? And you get creative with those offers. Um,
Right. And to that point, it's really important to listen to the people who are around you. So I started off only offering full service because that's where the money is. And I found that I had a lot of potential clients coming to me and saying, well, no designer in the area will take on my project because it's too small. And for me, that was light bulb. Okay, I can be the one designer in this area who does it because now that client's going to refer me to everybody else. And so it's really important to take note of what people are saying to you when they come to you so you can be sure that you're tailoring your packages exactly to what they're looking for.
yeah. So how do you chat about, markup with clients if they're asking about it, if they're trying to shop around on the side, like how
Mm-hmm.
do you handle, they're like, oh, can I get a discount? How do you handle all of that? Because obviously that's very related to budget conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. This goes back to setting expectations. So, in my welcome guide, I have all of this written down. And at the end of the consultation, I spend the last 15 minutes and I go over my welcome guide with them from beginning to end. And I highlight all of the important parts. I literally have a full page on there that says, you are not to shop when we are working together because that hinders my ability to do this design appropriately. And I have to take time to answer your questions, to make sure that this is the right size and to work around it. And you're going to end up paying me more
Mm,
while you're shopping. So I'm very explicit. That's not a thing in this. And I also tell them, again, I'm very direct. I tell them up front, I'm not shopping around for the best price for you. That's not my job. I'm not a personal shopper. I'm a designer. It's my job to give you and deliver you the design first. Now, if you're budget conscious, fine, we can increase my design fee 75% because it's going to take me a whole lot longer to be
mm,
sure that I'm giving you the products at the best price possible. I essentially have to shop myself now. And if
right.
you want to spend the extra money doing that, then that's fine. But it would save you a lot of time to just pay what I'm offering than to increase the number of hours to do that. And so that's kind of how I leverage it in the beginning. And after that, it's nobody's business what my margin is, how I'm marking up, or any of those things. And when I have had clients ask, again, very direct, and I will say, that's proprietary information that belongs to the vendor. I'm legally not allowed to disclose what my pricing is with them.
Mhm.
Understand, I'm giving you the pricing that I can give you as they've set. And that's it. And nobody asks questions after that. Once you throw around that it's a legal thing, people just shut up and move on.
That's great. I love it. Well, I think we have covered a vast array of unique kind of approaches to talking about client budgets. So I really appreciate your time. I know that you have given us at Design Files a 25% off code for your templates and your guides and your forms. Somewhere in this video, inside of the event, there's a pinned post
Mhm.
with that link. And Kim also has a free blog post that is like super detailed with all of these scripts for talking about client budgets. So there's a link to that as well in that pinned post.
Mhm.
So definitely check that out. Kim, is there anything that you wanted to say about the guide? Because what is the name of the good, better, best thing is inside of, what is the name of that guide?
Yeah, it's my budgeting guide. So when you are on my website, that's what you would look for. Again, that can be your back end, that can be client facing. I've used it as an opt-in. I even have an automated process on my website that essentially is the good, better, best guide, but it does all the calculations for you, so I can save a little bit of time when and where I need to. I also have that linked on my welcome guide. So when my clients get the virtual, PDF version, they're able to click the button and they're able to go figure it out themselves. And so some clients will need it and I'll say, click the link and go have fun, right? Doesn't need to be on my dime or my time or any of those things. So yeah, that's in there with a ton of other things. I have what I call courses that are PDF versions, right? So you're not actually forced to sit there and listen to me talk. You could just download it, but that's really great entryways into the industry. Talks about working with wholesale, finding your ideal client, which we've touched upon today, those sorts of things. And then there are templates for pretty much everything under the sun, and they are not just empty templates. These are my processes hand delivered to you. So you'll see my 12-step process to full service, my timeline, the pricing for that, how I go over it. My welcome guide is in there, which is quite extensive. But there are so many value adds in there that can essentially just help you run your business from ground up. You don't need to get the experience. Just take these forms and implement them yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely like obsessed with actionable templates, right? And forms and like plug and play
Yeah.
versus courses, such a better approach. We are getting a lot of, thank you comments and that this was so informative and amazing. So Kim, thank you so very much for your time. And I hope everybody has an excellent rest of their day. So bye for now.
Thank you. I'm so glad. And if anybody has any questions, find my website. Feel free to email me. I'm happy to talk through it. The blog post does have most of this information plus a ton of scripts to work through. But if you do have follow-up questions, I'm here and I'm happy to walk you guys through it. Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And Cole has just dropped all the helpful links in the comments, so check those out. Thank you guys. Have a good one. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you. Bye.